My name is Liz Horrobin. I'm from the British Dyslexia Association, and I'd like to welcome you all to the second part of our webinar series, Boosting Achievement of Children in Care, Understanding and Supporting Neurodiversity. I'm delighted to be able to welcome again Jenny Price to be our presenter for today's session. Jenny is a qualified specialist teacher who works in Suffolk and Norfolk. She has lots of experience of working with children, both looked after children and working as an educational psychologist with the child and educational psychology practice. Jenny's particularly interested in effective interventions for learners, and she's supported a number of research projects considering literacy and numeracy approaches. She's a member of the professional association PATHOS, and she's delighted to be here with us to present today. Jenny, can I hand over to you?
Thank you very much, Liz. Yes, very excited to share this second of our two training sessions. And today we're going to look at some of the challenges faced by looked after children in education in practical terms. Last time we presented the concept of neurodiversity as a spectrum encompassing all human cognitive variation. Alongside, we discussed the notion of holistic profiling using the Neurodiversity Profiler. We hope that you may have had an opportunity to try that profiler out. But if not, please don't worry, because you can access it as often as you like. As Liz said, it's available to download and within your notes. What we're going to talk about today just having a little slide stuck moment here. Bear with me. Just need to get this to move on, which it's not doing. Okay, I wonder what's happened. We're going to look at using the profiler in more detail, and we're going to discuss how it can help us to gain a greater understanding of children and young people, just to ensure that they get the support that they need. We're going to look at 3 case cameos, and all 3 share possible unidentified specific learning differences. And the case cameos are part of your training notes. I'm just going to need to stop and ask Rebecca if she can help with this. Is it possible to switch presenters here, Rebecca? Because my slideshow is stuck in the best and worst.
Yes, no problem. I'll change it over to my screen now, if everyone can just bear with us for one moment. Really sorry for the inconvenience.
Thank you very much, Rebecca. So while Rebecca's doing that, I think we all recognise, don't we, that a move between schools or college coincided with an entry into care or any change of placement places increased anxiety and upheaval for young people. Separation anxiety and feelings of guilt can cause behaviour to deteriorate and learning needs to become more concerning. But the situation can only be worsened if the child or young person is also struggling from unidentified learning differences, which are making their life at school problematic. So it's within these case cameos that we're going to look at today that we're going to look at insights offered by the Neurodiversity Profiler and to think about the type of support strategies that might be appropriate. So moving on to the next slide. Can we see that now? Rebecca, have you got the second slide up?
I have my screen up now, so hopefully everybody can see my screen in a moment.
Hooray! Yes, I can see your screen. That's a relief.
Sorry about that, everybody.
No worries. Okay, so 3 parts case studies, neurodiversity profiler, and support strategies. So let's move on, Rebecca, to the next slide. Thank you. These are our case cameos. There's Connor, who attends a primary school, Amy, who is 15 and at secondary school, and 17-year-old Chelsea, who attends a further education college. We hope that their stories may certainly ring some bells, and you may well recognise aspects of the issues that they're facing. All the materials for this part of the training can be found in the notes that accompany it. So let's move on and meet Connor. Now, Connor is 9 and he has 2 younger siblings who he's always looked out for. He's been in care for 18 months, but only recently moved to his current placement and new school. At his PEP review, which took place at his previous school, there was concern about his literacy skills. However, his new foster carers are very committed to helping him settle, and their focus is on his emotional well-being, as they feel progress with learning will follow only after he's adjusted to his new school. However, his social worker is worried that he's falling behind, and she was concerned when she learned that Connor's foster carers had observed that he continually moves his head close to and then away from a book as he tries unsuccessfully to read. The social worker is also aware that Connor loves animals and decided that by using the profiling tool, she could try and connect with him and really understand what it is about school and reading that is so challenging for him. So Connor sat with his social worker to complete the part B of the profiler. They talked together about his likes and dislikes, gradually building a picture that would triangulate with the part A of the checklist that his school and foster carers were going to do. In the process of working with Connor, he confided that he's really upset that he can't read, and he actually said, "I'm stupid." His construct is that because of that, he can't have any friends. Now, the part A that was undertaken separately with carers and his teacher enabled a clear pattern of strengths and areas for development to emerge. There were elements that they hadn't considered before, and the process of sharing the discussion helped the key adults supporting Connor to begin to see things from his perspective. So moving on, Rebecca. This slide summarises some of the key points from Connor's profile. He's clearly an empathic and caring boy, especially with regards to his relationship with his brothers and his love of animals. However, he does have difficulty with making friends, and it seems that he's often on his own in the playground. Connor is linking these difficulties in making friends with his problems in the classroom, where he cannot always focus on tasks and is particularly struggling with reading. Now, that could be due to visual stress. The clue there is his difficulty in focusing on text. However, we know it's also vital for an optician to check his vision before exploring any issue around visual stress. So the next slide, we'll consider some of the support strategies that we would want to put in place. So if we can move on to that, Rebecca. Let's think about the problems. He's isolated and uncommunicative in the playground. Okay, so the foster carer hadn't realised that the local offer, which is part of the local authority SEN information, was describing the cub group that Connor could attend as one that specialises in supporting children with additional needs. Since they've learned this from the local offer, they're keen to access this possibility. A further thought would be that the circle of friends intervention could be used to widen and reinforce the positive aspects of his profile. With appropriate training, the adults at the cub group could actually implement this approach with Connor and a group of carefully selected peers. So that's one possibility. Let's think about Connor in the classroom. We know he's unable to maintain focus during whole class activities. What we see is him turning around, fidgeting, tapping. He also has difficulty planning tasks. Now, this could be due to ambivalent attachment, hence the need to scan the room to make sure he's feeling safe. Or there may be an unidentified specific learning difficulty. So what could the possible solutions be? Well, making sure Connor is positioned so that he can see the whole class will help. For key adults, making sure that when he's in class, there is validation of his feelings. Maybe comments such as, "I can see you're upset, unable to concentrate." Helping him to break tasks down so he doesn't feel quite so overwhelmed. And saying things like, "Okay, let's focus on one part of the whole task first." Now, in addition to this, it may be appropriate for an assessment of his cognitive profile alongside the information already gained from the profiler would begin to put a more cohesive picture of Connor together. Now, we know that he has limited progress with reading, so checking for visual stress after a routine eye check has eliminated any problem. The school could really focus on an evidence-based reading intervention that is structured, systematic, and cumulative. And the foster carer could support Connor to use the school library, and maybe the librarian could be asked to make a special collection of stories and factual books about animals that are age appropriate for Connor. Alongside, having books and stories read aloud to him will help Connor develop a genuine love of books. The Scottish libraries have produced a really interesting report on the impact of libraries on learning, which you may find useful to download, and the link is in the notes. We would suggest sharing Connor's one-page profile with him, perhaps as part of the personal education plan meeting. This will give him ownership of his story and explain the support he needs to address the things that he is worried about. So moving on from Connor to Amy. Now, Amy is 15. She's the only child of a single mother who has a life-limiting medical condition, and this has necessitated Amy being taken into care. That happened 6 months ago. She is extremely anxious about her mum, which is understandable, and she doesn't want to attend school on some days, and she complains that's because she can't sleep and therefore she's too tired. Her foster carer has also noticed that she's very clumsy and has difficulty with using cutlery, scissors, and pens and pencils. Her handwriting is barely legible. Days that she is reluctant to attend school and complains of a tummy ache appear to follow a pattern and to be linked to activities that require any quantity of handwritten work. Amy rarely finishes work, and homework is often not completed. However, in class, she contributes good ideas and is willing to join in with group work and discussions. At her previous school, she was a member of the school choir and often performed in school concerts. There is a planned PEP meeting in 6 weeks' time, and the school have invited carers in for a pre-PEP meeting. Amy's carers, Amy herself and her head of year, sat down to complete part A of the profiler and to explore her profile in depth. Amy also worked separately with the Senko on part B of the profiler, and a rich picture was easily developed that was used to support the upcoming PEP meeting. Moving on. This slide summarises the key points from Amy's profile. It appears that it's revealing a range of strengths and challenges. She has particular strengths in oral language and music, especially singing. Her relationship with her mother reveals a very sensitive and caring nature, but her mother's illness is causing anxiety issues over and above, and a lack of sleep is affecting her energy levels and her ability to concentrate at school. In addition, we know that Amy has problems with fine motor skills, and this is affecting her written work. So let's have a look at the next slide at some support strategies. She's struggling to complete classwork and she tires quickly. It appears from discussion that foster family have been asked to check sleeping habits and diet. It came to light that Amy is using her phone late into the night, constantly checking to see if she had a WhatsApp message from her mum. The social worker worked with a foster carer, Amy's mum, and her carer, and they agreed that messages would be sent between 4 p.m. and 6 p.m. And mum's carer would take the lead responsibility, so Amy knew every day that her mum was thinking of her. Supper would be relaxed without Amy needing to rush off before she had finished her meal to check her messages, and at bedtime her phone was going to be left downstairs. Moving on to the fine motor skills, the social worker, sorry Rebecca, can we move back? I used moving on incorrectly, sorry. The social worker agreed with foster carers that she appears to have very flexible finger joints and difficulty gripping, lifting and manipulating small objects. It was agreed that the school should seek advice from an occupational therapist. In the meantime, certain actions could easily be taken. Seating at school, making sure Amy is positioned with her bottom at the back of the chair and her feet on the floor. The table should be at a correct height, so she is able to rest her forearms comfortably with her shoulders relaxed. Writing tools should be the correct weight for Amy's hand. There are a variety of different pen types, and her foster carers are keen to try out what works for her best and let her have a go with different pens. Amy should also be allowed to use a laptop to complete work whenever possible and learn to use both voice-activated software alongside developing her keyboard skills. Now, the profiler, most importantly, identified that Amy had a previous passion for singing, and she's probably missing taking part in musical activities. These potentially contribute a great deal to Amy's sense of well-being and self-esteem. So an immediate solution was that Amy's head of year agreed to facilitate greater involvement with the school musical department, and she supported Amy in auditioning for a role in the upcoming school musical. So following these discussions, the support strategies were set in place. Now we know that they may need to be tweaked, and once achieved, there will be more to try. It's the open and regular discussion and review with Amy and all the supporting adults that is so crucial. Moving on. Our final case cameo is Chelsea, and this is her story. Chelsea is now 17 and has had many moves of school since she was 9 years old. The type of school have varied between very small village schools large primaries, a pupil referral unit, and finally a newly opened secondary academy. She didn't do well there and was unsuccessful in her GCSEs. However, she's just started a hairdressing course at her local further education college. Chelsea has no contact with her parents. She remembers that her mum was a hairdresser, and that's probably why she's always been fascinated by hair colours and styles. She has excellent practical skills, quickly picking up how to make and create when it's a hands-on activity. However, she does get stressed with too many instructions. Her lead tutor has noticed she sometimes seems to completely ignore instructions and zones out. In her technical classes, she is struggling to apply ratios when preparing dies. Her tutor has noticed she reverses numbers, such as 12 and 21, and she freezes when any maths is required. Chelsea says that maths is a waste of time and nothing to do with hairdressing. She is questioning why she has to do more of it when she hated the subject at school. Chelsea was asked to complete Part B of the profiler. She did so with interest and appeared to enjoy the process. She also added several interests to the list, and this gave a different insight into her personality and how she was thinking. The tutor and Chelsea then sat down together to work through the Part A. The information gathered alongside Chelsea's own self-reported profile began a meaningful conversation about what did hinder and what did actually help her. The succinct and clear descriptors translated into meaningful provision to best meet her needs. So if we look at the next slide, this summarises the key points from Chelsea's profile. Now, there will be other areas that you might wish to pick up on, but identifying this in terms of strengths and challenges is an important step for putting the right support in place. It's Chelsea's enthusiasm for the course she's now following that's pivotal, and her talent for creative and practical skills that are going to build her self-esteem. Chelsea's issues with numeracy point to a specific maths difficulty. Initial thinking, this was possibly dyscalculia, but it is important that her challenges with maths are supported quickly to avoid any further anxiety or loss of confidence. So let's look at what happened in practice. So the next slide. These support strategies were recommended. Now, we know that her maths difficulties needed assessment, and it was Chelsea's specialist tutor that identified that her problems were actually consistent with dyslexia. And key aspects of her profile were processing speed, auditory short-term and working memory, and visual spatial memory. These abilities are required not just for maths, but also for reading, comprehension, free writing, spelling, following verbal instructions and conversations. And it is these difficulties that can impact on concentration and losing focus in lessons. So the support centred on helping Chelsea to understand her own profile, and by working with her tutor, it was agreed what appropriate support strategies were important for her. Small group tuition and a chance to revisit earlier misconceptions, addressing conceptual understanding of number bonds and multiplication via access to concrete apparatus, making sure all the foundation techniques were understood and thoroughly practiced. For example, mental addition, such as bridging to 10, understanding of place value. The barrier to learning caused by a lack of self-belief can't be ignored. Gradually and consistently building her confidence was so important. Tutors were asked to avoid giving Chelsea multiple instructions. And this made a huge difference. She was not overloaded. Breaking information into small chunks and giving numbered rather than a bullet point list also helped her. Wherever possible, visual reinforcement of verbally presented or written information supported her weaker memory. And making learning more personal and meaningful, and tapping into those areas of her interests, hairdressing, cooking, makeup, etc. Those were the things that motivated and engaged Chelsea. Overriding that, it's about enabling learning by experience rather than just being told information that made a great difference to Chelsea. So the next slide. The neurodiversity profile is potentially a very powerful tool to use in building a holistic picture of children and young people. Most important is to bear in mind that it is a tool to be used with the interviewee in a collaborative process. So the first step should always be to explain fully and clearly the purpose of the profiler, how it works, and how the results will be used. The profiler is part of a process which aims to provide suitable and relevant support for the child or young person. It is crucial that it's followed up by appropriate actions, whether these involve further assessment or support mechanisms and/or interventions in their education. That's the critical thing, to take action. But it is the profiler that can enable greater understanding both for the individual of their own neurocognitive profile and for the professionals who work with them. We hope that this greater understanding will lead to enhanced self-esteem, resilience, and future success. So we're going to look next, on the next slide, at the top generic support strategies. Now, there are a number of issues which can affect individuals with specific learning difficulties. These can include attention deficit, weak memory, processing issues, and overriding low self-esteem. The support strategies listed here are appropriate for many children and young people. Using simple, clear language helps to support those with developmental language difficulties and those with dyslexia and those with dyspraxia, ADHD and ASD. Remember that individuals with specific difficulties will often have weak short-term and working memory. So chunking information and instructions into one step at a time will really help to ensure that they are not overloaded. Slower processing skills are a feature of many specific difficulties. So allowing extra time for information to sink in and giving time for children or young people to formulate their response is crucial. Try to avoid rushing them or interrupting their thought processes before they've had a chance to give you their answer. We know that children and young people with specific difficulties do experience frustration and even anger as a result of the difficulties that they experience. But those who have to deal with the additional stress of being in care are likely to be even more prone to these feelings of frustration and anger. Therefore, understanding causes that may underlie challenging behaviour is key to dealing with it. It's also important to remember that other behaviours may have their origins in specific learning difficulties. So, for example, difficulties with speech and language may cause the child or young person to seem uncommunicative or rude. Undiagnosed ASD and associated social differences may well give the impression of unfriendliness or rudeness and may cause the child or young person to become more withdrawn and uncommunicative. Poor memory may be wrongly understood as being difficult or just not trying. Dyslexic or dyspraxic difficulties can lead to problems with organisation, which may be interpreted as willful carelessness. An uneven pattern of strengths, for example, very good verbal abilities, coupled with poor literacy skills, may also give the impression that the child or young person isn't trying. Instead, discrepancies of this kind should act as an alarm bell for you to investigate further what's behind this behaviour and this presentation of learning. At all times, communication is key. Speak to the child or young person and try to find out what really makes them tick. By showing that you're really interested, by listening carefully to what they have to say, that's the thing, the rapport. Find out what works for them, what they enjoy doing, and respect their differences. Just as biodiversity is essential to the well-being of the planet, so neurodiversity is essential to the success of our species. Demonstrate that you fully embrace this idea and recognise the ways in which all our lives are enhanced and enriched by that diversity. Help the children and young people in your care to see that they have a role to play and they are valued for it. So moving to the end of the presentation now, what are the next steps? Well, no training session is really complete without considering that important thing. What are you going to do? Decisions regarding this will depend on the existing level of knowledge and any gaps that you have been able to identify during this training in your own knowledge and awareness. But we would suggest practicing by looking at the Neurodiversity Profiler, perhaps working with one other or in small groups to share ideas and to begin to get that understanding of specific difficulties. It may also be useful to consider more in-depth training on specific learning difficulties or any other of the issues which may affect learning outcomes identified in these sessions. Links to organisations who provide CPD training are included in the Guide to Specific Learning Difficulties, which is one of your resources. It can also be useful to create a library of resources about neurodiversity and specific learning differences. You could either do this online or create a hard copy or do both. So our final slide today gives you the resources and links for the documents that we've referred to in this session. Alongside the references from part 1, they provide a starting point for your further reading and exploration of neurodiversity. And now we'd be happy to take your questions. Over to Liz.
Thank you so much, Jenny, for that presentation. I hope everybody has found it as fascinating as I have. We're open now to questions. If you would like to type in anything that you'd like to, then we'll do our very best to answer your queries. Please fire away. Jenny, is there anything that you would like to add yourself while people think about what questions you might like to put to you?
Well, interestingly, Liz, we were talking about it earlier, and we talked about the post-traumatic growth and this concept that trauma and adversity in some children and young people, not all, but in some, actually brings out a level of resilience and capacity to grow and develop within a foster care or care situation, and it can be a changing point for children to be taken into care. Now, I'm sure that's not an unfamiliar scenario to social workers, and it's wonderful when that happens. But I guess for us, the issue is that we also need to make sure there are no underlying learning issues that are responsible for behaviour and learning in the classroom.
Indeed, yeah. Now, Jenny, I've just had a question pop up from Haley, who is asking for section A of the profiler. Is it advisable to use the questions for the individual's actual biological age or their cognitive age? So if you have a child, for example, with a much younger cognitive age, would it be better to use the early years profiler than a primary one, for example?
Yeah. Yes, I think it would. If you're familiar with both, then you can see there is a nuanced difference between the two. But I don't see any issue with that at all for a child with quite, I'm guessing, quite a complex profile in terms of their neurodevelopment.
Yeah, and I think as well, Haley, when we were putting together the neurodiversity profiler, we took the decision to put the emojis in the early years and the primary questionnaire for Form B. But I was very aware when we were doing that there will be some learners aged 12, 13, 14, perhaps, who may prefer using emojis to respond rather than a series of numbers from 1 to 5. So again, you know, with Form B, do feel free to play with that as well. Okay, do we have any further questions? People are being quite quiet today with their questions.
Everybody's wanting their lunch.
Yeah. We're used to having lots and lots fired at us, but it's quite a lot. Perhaps everybody is feeling quite confident. Can I ask if everyone is feeling confident about using the profiler? I have a question from Ravi. Ravi is saying, can we share the profiles that we presented? Ravi, all of the profiles are available in the training notes and materials, which you can access from the BDA website. Now, Rebecca put up the link earlier today in a message that went out to everybody. So you should be able to find that. But if you have any problems at all, Ravi, then do contact Project A at bdadyslexia.org.uk, and we'll be happy to send materials directly to you. But you should be able to find them all and download them all on the website.
I think to add in there, Liz, it's a really useful opportunity if you get together as a team to actually create a real profile of students that you're dealing with. So looking at their particular areas of difficulty and strengths, and looking at strategies that you would put in place. So actually doing that exercise with a blank profiler is really productive.
Yes. Yes, and I think, you know, as much practice as you can possibly do, just to begin to feel your way around about the profiler. We are aware that there are just so many different aspects to the profiler, lots of different possible behaviours to identify, and then how those overlap with different SPLD. There's a lot to take in. Jill has put in a comment to say that she's no questions, but lots to think about. Yeah, there is a lot to think about here, Jill, and certainly much more than we can possibly cover in just one webinar. But we hope that with all of the resources that you're able to take away, then that will give you a really good starting point. And remember that if you have any questions at all, you are very, very welcome to contact us afterwards and to put those questions to us. Haley is asking again, will we be receiving any certification for this course? We don't do actual certificates, Haley, but if you contact Project A, we're very happy to provide an email saying that you have attended. We have a list of everybody's attendance, when they joined the webinar, when they left the webinar, so we can provide emails actually confirming that you were there. Nikki is saying that the webinars have been useful. We're looking forward to using the tool in our service. Thank you, Nikki. That's really our biggest aim, that people will take these materials away and use them with our teams. Jenny, did you want to add anything there?
Yes, that's our passion, really, that we're giving it to you to use in your context, and your narrative, your script, your messages are going to be individualized around your context. And I think that's the important thing. The framework of the training is there. The slides are written in what we hope is a clear and accessible way, but how you come to those and how you do the activities and do the discussion in between the sessions and during the sessions, that's what's going to make this a powerful piece of training, not just listening to a webinar. So that would be our best hope. So yes, please take and do with what you will, because that's really exciting.
And please, do feel free to share with us your experiences of using the materials. It's a bit like for us having a child and sending them off out into the world and never hearing from them again. We really want to know what's happened to the materials we've put together, whether people have found that they've worked for them, if there's anything that you would have wanted us to do differently. We're really, really passionate, as Jenny says, about getting this right and knowing that the materials are useful, hopefully. Sarah says she's used a profiling tool now to collate background info on a student who was doing a post-16 diagnostic assessment and found it very useful. That's great, Sarah. I'm really glad to hear that. Sarah said it gave lots of information on the student. Did the student complete Form B, Sarah, and did they enjoy doing that? That's something I'm really curious about. Rachel is asking, can the profiles be used as part of a dyslexia report? What would you say, Jenny?
Yes, I think they could. Remembering it isn't the same as an assessment. It would be part of the background, part of the very rich picture that you would want to include in any assessment, but it doesn't take the place of diagnostic standardized assessment tests. But absolutely, as an appendix, I would welcome it. And in fact, my team are all absolutely up for it and enjoying using it. So yeah, totally.
That's really good to know, Jenny. Thank you. Joanna says, thank you for the really useful training. Thank you, Joanna. Joanna's going to look at the use of the profile with her Senko to see if it can be used as a tool throughout the school, as well as with looked after children. And it's great that we include early years. Yeah, we included early years by popular demand, Joanna, and hope that it will be used with younger children as well. Again, early identification of any challenges is essential. The sooner that you can put in support, the better. Remember that the profiler is not about labeling, it's not a diagnostic tool. What it's all about is identifying the needs of the individual and ensuring, and this is the really, really important part, ensuring that support strategies are put in place as soon as possible. We hear anecdotally so many stories about situations where a school has not taken any kind of action on a child because they're still waiting for a diagnostic assessment to be done. And that is just a criminal shame. There is no point in waiting for months, perhaps, before something is done, before you actually put support in place. Hopefully this tool will speed the process along. Helen has started to test out the profiler. It takes a while to go through it first time, but she thinks I'll get used to the phrases and it'll become quicker. And it certainly seems thorough. Well, that's good. Haley is saying we're unsure about how to use Form B exactly. Haley, I would say that it depends on the age of the individual. When Jenny was talking about the case cameos, the suggestion was that Chelsea was able to sit down with Form B and do it herself because she was old enough. But the younger case cameos might need to sit down and do them with a bit of adult support. Jenny, would you say anything about those?
Yes, I think actually in Chelsea's case, the fact that she did do it independently was more productive than doing it with a tutor sort of breathing down her neck. However, for Amy, it was really important for her to do it alongside the Senko. So I think you just have to use your knowledge of the young person and make that call. I think either way. I mean, certainly for a younger student that's not reading particularly fluently, then you would want to share the questioning with them and help them.
Yeah. Sorry, Jenny. What I think I would do, Hayley, if I was working with a younger child, would be perhaps to print out the emojis and just have those sitting on a table, and then read out different things, you know, like, do you like reading books? And have them point to the emoji that represents how they feel, you know, rather than do it on the screen. I think there's different ways that you can play with the ideas. You don't need to make it very formal. It can become, you know, almost a bit of a game with younger kids. And older ones, they're able to see more the purpose and to think through it more analytically. Faye is saying, excellent webinar and love the profilers. Thank you, Faye. With the current consultation on the Children's Mental Health Green Paper, can we make sure rolling out this neurodiversity training and the resources are included? Very important to understand what's behind mental health issues. I would agree entirely, Faye. What would you say to that, Jenny?
Yes, totally. And looking to the future, it's going to be really difficult with the small amount of money that every school is going to receive to think how they could productively use that. And this is all free. So just sort of thinking about children in this way and eliminating various other factors can actually affirm that mental health does need to take priority. So we're not ducking that and saying, gosh, you know, every student with this presentation has a specific difficulty. It may well be that it is their well-being and self-belief that needs to be tackled. So schools need to be clear, and colleges need to have clarity as well about where the priority lies for that particular young person at any particular stage. So very much hope that it can be included as part of an approach. And given what we know about budgets, anything that schools can have that lead them in a productive thinking train is worthwhile, isn't it? Mm.
Absolutely, absolutely. Hayley is just saying, would the profiler then lead to the creation of the one-page personal profile? That's the aim, Hayley, that the results then are condensed into that one-page piece that can be shared easily with all the teachers, social workers, everyone who works with that child in their education process. A lot of research has been done, a lot of writing has been done on the value of having very succinct one-page profiles. The ones that I've seen that have been most successful, and so this is what we've tried to emulate in the one-page profile examples that we've created here, are the ones that capture the voice of the child or the young person themselves. So that's why the case cameo profiles appear with a little bit of backstory in the voice of the child or young person. I think when you're doing that profile, it's essential to involve the learner in the process. It's something that they have to own if it's going to be at all meaningful. Jenny, would you like to add anything there?
Yes, I was just reflecting. We use an approach called Circle of Adults, which is a graphic facilitation exercise, bringing together those that are stuck with a problem around a young person. So usually in the room there would be teachers, teaching assistants, parent, psychologist, teacher, all those people that are really struggling. Now, this is not something that we include the child in. However, if we had the profile in front of us for that exercise, I think it would enrich the process because we would have their voice without them being present in that particular context. So that's something called Circle of Adults, and it's a recognised therapeutic approach to having meaningful conversations with everybody that's stuck. And I can, you know, see social workers really gaining from being involved for these very hard to reach and very tricky children that sometimes we do get stuck with. So it's not an approach we use very often, but when we do, I think this part B for that particular student would be a real asset to have that.
And part B was added to the Neurodiversity Profiler really as a result of feedback that we had last year when we created the first version of the Neurodiversity Profiler in our Teaching for Neurodiversity training that we did with schools last year. A lot of feedback said, well, it's great that you're identifying so many challenges, but can we have something that's more positive as well, that identifies strengths? So that's how the Form B part of the profiler was born. And I think it's a really valuable asset to the profiler. Sarah has asked where she should direct further questions to. So Sarah, I've just put out a message to everyone with my email address. So any further inquiries, questions, please contact me directly. And if there's anything I get stuck on, then I'll go straight to Jenny and ask her for the answer to it.
Thanks, Liz.
Joanna is saying, what experience do you have of the response of other professionals to schools' use of the profile? For example, evidence in an EHCP application. At the moment, Joanna, it's a new tool. So we don't have, or certainly I haven't heard any feedback at this early stage. Jenny, from your own use of the profile, has anything come back to you?
No, not directly, no. But I know that in terms of clarification, it's a real benefit to have those statements and those things in mind when one is writing a report. Or at a meeting to discuss the need for an EHCP, for example. So as part of the graduated response of Assess, Plan, Do, Review that schools are involved with through the Code of Practice, I would totally recommend any student, not just looked after children, would benefit from doing the profile.
Absolutely. The more information you can get about an individual, the better, and the more exploration that you can have into what makes them tick, the better. Okay, well, there are no further questions bouncing up, so I'm assuming that there aren't any more to come. I'm going to give a final 10 seconds warning. If you've got a last question, please type it in now. Otherwise, again, I'd like to thank Jenny so much for a fascinating presentation today. I'd like to thank you all for attending. Please be aware that next Wednesday at the same time, we'll be holding the last of our webinars, which is aimed at parents and carers, but also at anyone who provides training for parents and carers. So if you're in that position and would like to attend, please do. If you know others who you think would benefit from the training, then please recommend it to us, and we'd love to welcome you along. Thank you very, very much for your time today. Hope you make good use of the materials, and do get back in touch with us to let us know how you get on.